Welcome to Politely Pushy. I'm your host, as always, Eric Chemi. Eric Chemi. Politely Pushy. I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Welcome to Politely Pushy. I'm your host, as always, Eric Chemi. Today, we've got a very different kind of episode. We're talking about analyst relations with two former technology research analysts right here with me. And I feel a little bit out of my element. So we've got Alex Soejarto, Gard with experience at IDC and Gartner, the big names here in the industry. As a media reporter, I didn't do that much with analysts. I felt like that was a whole other world. When I heard analysts, I thought of Wall Street equity research analysts, right? The guys that say, hey, this stock's a buy, this stock's a sell, that kind of stuff. So what you guys do is a little foreign to me. I hope my questions are good enough to keep up with you guys. You guys are always the smartest people in the room because you actually go through the details and you spend a lot of time researching and analyzing what's going on in the industry. So I want to just start quickly with each of you. I'll go to Alex first. How did you both get into the world of analyst relations? Because it's certainly not the kind of thing that when they do career day at school, right? They're not saying, hey, come be an analyst, right? It's a different kind of mentality for that one.
Yeah, super interesting. So maybe to talk a little bit about my trajectory, I went to business school and then I joined PwC. And after PwC, I joined Gartner and I spent 15 years at Gartner, almost 16. And then I took a little break, worked with some consulting firms, and then I now joined BossBar to lead their AR practice. And the way I joined analyst relations was purely by chance, because I had been talking to a lot of folks back then in the internet consulting space. I was thinking about becoming an internet consultant in 2000.
What does that mean, an internet consultant?
That's literally when e-commerce started. If you remember 2000, when e-commerce started.
Who would you be consulting for? What are you consulting about? What would that mean?
So that means investors were thinking about putting together a business. Company leaders were thinking about business models and what their revenue model in this internet age would look like. And so I learned a lot about the space. And then this position came up at Gartner to be the industry analyst for e-commerce and internet consulting. And I said, I know stuff about that. And that's how I joined Gartner. And then my trajectory at Gartner was 15 to 16 years, looking at services from enterprise software to business intelligence and analytics and AI.
And Gard, I know just retired, like this past month, you just retired, you're living the dream. You're in Paris now. So we've got all the time zones across the Western Hemisphere here covered from San Francisco to Paris. You just finished, but how did you get started? Take me back to the beginning.
Yeah, so similar to Alex, I was also a management consultant at PwC and was a consumer essentially of the industry research from folks like Gartner and IDC. They were what helped me keep one step ahead of clients, basically. So that was the initial connection, and at that point in my life where I didn't want to be in consulting anymore, it was around 2007. I looked into different opportunities, and one came along with IDC. So was there for 18 years, focusing on services research, also similar to Alex, mostly project-based services, in and around all the emerging service opportunities. So really, the connect with analyst relations has been through being an industry analyst, which you asked about sort of financial analysts. We tend to think of ourselves as one of the inputs to their buy, sell, hold decisions. So it's a slightly different, but certainly connected to that world as well. But that's how I got to interact with all the folks more directly as an analyst through IDC.
And I want to say that I invited Gart to this conversation because we've known each other for a dozen years. I don't know, a long time. Right, because as part of being industry analysts, we go to similar conferences, we go to similar events that vendors host, or industry, things like at the SAP annual conference. Yeah.
But you guys are the ultimate competitors, right? One of you is Gartner, one of you is IDC. Like it's a little awkward. So is it friendly? How you're competing for clients, you're competing for business, you're competing for better research, but yet but you're friendly. You're here hanging out together. What was that co-opetition like?
I never thought it was competition, honestly, right? Because you have separate client bases, the businesses are separate, and I didn't feel like we were ever like head to head, right? We were each looking at our own research agendas. That's how I felt. I had my research agenda, and I was focused on the questions that I was interested in.
I think obviously there is some competition between the companies, but the truth is at events it didn't feel that way. I agree, Alex, that just wasn't wasn't a major factor in the moment of the events. Those tended to be for a wide audience of firms and an opportunity to exchange ideas.
So what's a quick history lesson? Gartner and IDC, they're the two big guys. How did they become so big? Well, how did they start? How did they come to dominate this area?
I'm happy to. There's a lot of lore at Gartner about Gideon Gartner starting, to some extent, part of the industry, right? So from what I understand, he went to IBM early in his career and saw a lot of the early growth of IBM, and then joined Oppenheimer funds to be a financial analyst. And that's where he learned the work of being an analyst, and then decided, hey, I can do something similar but different. And then that's when he started Gartner Group in, I believe, the late 70s, early 80s. And Gartner Group he eventually sold that to different private equity folks. It went public as Gartner Inc. And it's gone through a few different transactions, a bunch of acquisitions. So when I started at Gartner, it was under $1 billion in revenue. When I left, it was about $4 billion in revenue, and today it's around $6 billion in revenue. It's pretty huge in a market. And I was doing little research before this that if you look at different places, the market research marketplace is estimated to be between $50 to $80 billion a year in revenue, right? What's interesting is people kind of say that he used things like computer chips, counting computer chips that were being produced, to then start to make estimates of trends in the marketplace. Where are they being bought and sold? Who's using them? What industries? And really starting to talk about the influence of computing power. And part of it was really because of the force of IBM and knowing IBM well, and then how that got into the marketplace.
So in terms of IDC, it was founded in 1964 by Pat McGovern. He was a MIT alum, and it was founded as a technology industry research company. I think one of the first tasks was counting IBM mainframes. Yep. I don't think there was a really good count of those, and there was a need for that, and so he developed a business that evolved into what is the tech industry research, and also business services research we do, or IDC does today. A few years later, I think maybe 1967, he launched Computer World. You may remember back in the day, print magazines, and IDG, International Data Group, then became the parent company, and it included the tech pub business, all of the different the things that came out of that, as well as IDC. Pat passed away in 2014, so around the 50th anniversary of the firm. It's been private, since it was founded, but the owners who sort of inherited it at the time of his passing didn't want a tech pub industry research business, and so it was sold to private equity, and now it's owned by Blackstone.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I remember I went to MIT and I had interviewed Pat McGovern a long time ago on my college radio show. And I remember he talked about starting this business, and he was trying to figure out how much to price it. And he had given some, in his head, I think he had a lower number, and someone advised him to say, make a really, really high number for this research, like $10,000 or something crazy. And it made it seem more valuable. Like, oh, it must be really good if it's that expensive. And I remember he told me that story, and this is going back like 20, 25 years ago. So Yeah, that's fascinating. But and obviously, they're very different now. We're counting chips, counting mainframes, a little bit different today. So what is it now? Right? Obviously, here at Bosport, it's a PR firm primarily. A lot of companies come to us. They want PR. They also want analyst relations. In some ways, they're similar. In some ways, they're different. Right? You're trying to get the attention of a certain stakeholder. How would you differentiate AR versus PR? I'll go to Alex first with that.
So the AR and PR are about messaging, but I think doing AR really well touches on business strategy of an organization, because so much of what you're trying to communicate to analysts, and that's what analyst relations is, right, is how your business strategy affects a customer's ability to do their function better, how your business strategy is in tune with the trends in the marketplace, and how your business strategy is going to help your company grow within that context. So it's a little bit different than PR, where I'm not a PR specialist, right? And I think that that's what's good about me joining BossBar, is we're bringing together two very different sets of competencies. But I think PR takes the messaging and really brings it to a wide audience, whereas analyst relations is really focused on the analyst audience.
Because I think about it, the analyst in a way is like the journalist, right? Hey, they're going to write about your company. They're similar to a journalist or an influencer who has a public platform to talk about your company. So you're still trying to get in front of them. Write about us, include us in your write-up, include us in what you're doing. Obviously, it's a different kind of story that they're telling, right? It's more about business strategy and technology as opposed to maybe some event that you did. But it's got a very similar type of structure because you want that megaphone. Hey, the person that has the megaphone, I need to get in front of that person.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that's true, Alex. I mean, obviously, both are involved with communication as the critical function. I tend to think of public relations as being a little bit more about disseminating the messages that the company, wants to, the public to receive at large. And it's sort of more of a one-way flow of information. I think analyst relations has a little bit more bi-directional flow to support the strategy that you talked about, Alex, to support this idea that you said, Eric, that the analysts, in their role is trying to understand the markets, is trying to communicate about the market and share their ideas. So, I think that there's a little bit more of a back and forth, I think, in the communication and in the need to understand the goals and roles that each of the people play in that.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of constituents in analyst relations as well, right? So an analyst relations professional is communicating to analysts, but as you said, when you create that feedback loop, you're bringing some of that information back into the organization, helping folks in product, helping folks in sales and marketing. And so that builds in constituencies, as well as I think customers are a big part of analyst relations constituency as well.
How do you measure success as an analyst? When you've got your latest piece of research, who do you want to read on? Who are you trying to impact? What's the goal of, okay, this was a successful endeavor here?
I can start off. I mean, it's a little hard to summarize, Eric, in the sense that, typically an organization like IDC has different audiences. One are the sort of syndicated subscription businesses. So, we have clients who buy access to us and our research. And so number one job is to make sure that they are reading it and we're accessible to them to answer questions and go deeper if they'd like, in whatever thinking or research topic that's involved. There's also custom, which obviously is not syndicated and as publicly available, but follows that same path basically. So success is obviously in my mind engagement with decision makers who understand the perspective, or at least understand the need for a third-party perspective on how the buyers and the sellers are meeting in the market, whatever market's getting covered.
Right, and I totally agree with that. And I think part of it is that people get lost in the reports of what analysts do, right? And I think
Because that's the public facing thing. That's the one thing we see. So we just assume, oh, they must have spent all their time writing these reports.
right, but the time is spent on the research, doing the research, right? And I think that to me, being a successful analyst, like you said, is the engagement part, is being able to share insights with vendor constituents or customer constituents or other marketplace constituents. And so that engagement can be from presentations and events. It can be from clients calling in and saying, I want to talk to this analyst about what they've written or what they're thinking. Or it could be custom engagements where companies call you in and say, hey, tell us where we fit in this marketplace and what we should be thinking about, right? And that's stuff that most folks don't see about analysts, what analysts do. And it's really the fun part.
What would a typical day have looked like? We just say, let's assume is it even an 8-hour day? Is it more like 10? Is it 12? Like, what's a typical day if you have all these different kinds of engagements going on? Just a sample of, here's a Tuesday. What would happen? Assuming you're at the office, let's say it's not a travel day, that you're at a conference or something like that.
Again, I'll start off, Eric. Blend of sort of 3 different types of things typically. I would try to do my sort of more creative writing or thinking earlier in the day. Try to carve out time for that. Spend maybe a third of my day on that, and then kind of the balance kind of split between just speaking with clients or prospects, in the spirit of what Alex was talking about, trying to give them some additional insight, or new business development. Whether that's trying to create more subscribers or build some custom assets. Those types of things. I think that would be a typical non-travel, non-event type day for me.
Yeah, totally agree. But it's funny that you say that, because when I was an analyst, I was about 50% on the road.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of travel.
Quite a bit, and so when you're in the office, and for me, it was a work from home job actually. So my whole time at Gartner was as a remote analyst, and
that's way pre-COVID. That's going back a long time. Yeah.
That's going back a long time. It was on the telephone and email, right?
Yeah.
And part of that too is, I'm sure, like Gartner, IDC had research communities internally, right? And so that was part of the day-to-day, getting together with some of the other analysts and discussing ideas, throwing ideas around. One other thing that I enjoyed was talking to customers, whether they're vendors or buyers of technology. And that's part of the day-to-day too, when you're in the office.
And so in that world, right? So if that's, let's say, what your typical day-to-day functions are, what makes for a strong AR program? Like, what should vendors be doing that they're not doing in order to get into that work cycle of yours, in order to get your attention? And you guys like, hey, you're traveling half the time, or, Gard's trying to do his creative work, or you're trying to do biz development, those kind of things. And then it's like, hey, I'm a vendor over here. I want your attention. I want to insert myself into your day. What's the best way? I'll start with you, Gard. What's the best way for them to be respectful of your time, but be useful and valuable so that you get something out of it, they get something out of it?
Sure. I think the best the best examples of that are AR folks that really just go beyond pushing information, from their executives to me, to the analyst, or just trying to set up meetings, and truly trying to make or build a relationship that's valuable to both sides. And that, that takes a lot of time. It requires some trust building, and the time is really required to sort of learn about, what is it that each individual analyst is interested in, and what's the connect between that analyst and my organization. I mean, IDC, I don't know the exact number, but it's probably roughly around 1,100 analysts around the world. So there's a lot of specialization, whether it's by industry or geography or function or technology. So there's a lot of work for the AR people to do to really get to know the things that are relevant to that analyst, and to make the match, to help make the match between that and what's relevant to their executives.
1,100 is a lot. That's very, like you said, that you got to really slice and dice. So for example, if you're one of those 1,100 people, what exact niche would you have been responsible for? Because you don't want to be overlapping and conflicting with other analysts.
Yeah, I mean, well, the truth is, Eric, I mean, with certainly all the digital technologies that are going on, there is overlap. There are not 1,100 discrete things,
right,
perfectly discrete, but within the spirit of trying to answer your question, I was a worldwide analyst, so that had a slightly different flavor than if I was an analyst in Europe or Japan, this type of thing, or I was a services analyst also. So, obviously all of the hardware and software domains and telecom domains would not be relevant directly, in as much as the services analysts really just look at the implementation of these types of things. So, it really was a mix of all of those things. And as I said at the top of the podcast, I was interested always in focusing on emerging service opportunities. So, what's been emerging over the last 18 years? A lot of that's been about cloud, the creation of that as a delivery model, some of the technologies that fold in under that and create the ability to transform businesses.
Yeah, Alex, what do you think about that in terms of what should vendors do that they're not often doing in order to get your attention in a good way without blasting you, bombarding you, and wasting your time?
Yeah, and Gard alluded to a little bit of this, but each firm, a Gartner, IDC, and then the others out there, have a calendar cycle, right? So at the end of the year, they're doing the research so that they can create a predicts for the next year. The different teams with those different specializations are doing forecasts so that they publish where they think the market growth and the opportunities are going to be. So at Gartner, we had hype cycles, right? So there's a normal approach to that. Then there's the cool vendors report, right? And so that was sometime in the first 6 months of the year. And then all these other reports. And
Magic Quadrant, cool vendors,
exactly.
All this stuff. That's all people want. That's all they talk about. The ones that don't know, I just need to get into that. I need to get on that.
So I think a big part of that is getting a real understanding of both the firm, what they're doing, and then how the analyst contributes. So if you're looking at a specific analyst with a specific specialization, how do they contribute across the year to that, and how does their personal research influence some of those things? And then I think that a real value that AR brings is then strategizing on how to position a company within that cycle, right? So if an analyst is going to do a Magic Quadrant, certainly if you fit the criteria, how do you get in there? But if there's a cool vendors report, maybe that's the one that's better. If you're talking about a hype cycle, maybe there's some technology that you want to bring forward to an analyst. If you're talking about forecast, maybe there's something about your planning that would be really interesting. You're building surveys every year in a company. Analysts want to hear about that. And some of those ideas could influence the way that they think about the market, results of those surveys. So organizing that complexity, right? So for me, right now, I'm just talking about Gartner, right? And so now you got to talk about IDC and Forrester and all these other.
Right. So if you're an AR person at a firm trying to get to you, that's just one analyst at one company. Now go do that for everybody else and figure out what they need at what time in the calendar.
Exactly.
And just Alex, further on that, you mentioned like cool vendors, for example, right? Hype cycle, all that. A lot of people people that I talk to, they say, oh, you're not going to get any great coverage unless you're a paying client. Like, we're too small. We don't pay. They're never going to give us the time of day and include us in these things because we don't pay. What do you say to that? Is that true?
I go back to what Gard said about building a relationship, right? Paying for a subscription gives you access. That's really what is important. So then you can actually get on and schedule time. You can find time and schedule with the analysts, right? Now they may be busy, and so you may not be able to do it the next day, right? That's a different challenge, but that allows you to do it. But I think building a relationship with an analyst then is really the way to communicate. And whether you're a paid client or not, that's really the important part.
Yeah, I agree, Alex. I mean, in the IDC world, there's obviously very, very strict rules about that. But the truth is these businesses are very complex. I mean, you mentioned SAP before, Alex, right? You can have a firm, it's 30,000, 40,000 SAP implementation practice folks all around the world. I mean, you can't understand all the nuances of that business at a single company in a 30-minute call. It takes time to develop that, and obviously, the more time that both sides invest, the more insight and the more value that they tend to bring to one another.
Small startups versus large vendors, they need a very different strategy, right? In terms of getting the right kind of coverage, right? Because you'll be familiar with the big guys. You probably have some kind of relationship or you've written about them. Here comes brand new startup. Hey, talk about us. We just raised $100 million and we're either pre-revenue or we're pre-profit and we have some revenue, but we think we're going to change the industry, or we're starting our own industry. You always hear that one too. What's the difference, or what should the difference in AR strategies be for a small startup or any kind of startup versus a big, large, and established vendor? I'll go to you, Alex.
A few specific former clients come to mind, but I think as a smaller organization, leadership needs to own the AR strategy. Larger organizations, AR are leading the AR strategy. And what do I mean by that? If you look at a company like Amazon, their AR team right now is really amazing. They're winning a lot of awards. They have huge budgets. They are making independent decisions. Leadership is available to them. And so the way that AR team can influence is beyond, really. If you're a small company, we just talked about it. The AR team doesn't have a big budget, right? So
or any budget
in terms of spending to go to analyst events and spending to go to other events where analysts are going to be present. The subscriptions to all the services, right? Paying for custom time and with analysts. So those are budgetary items. And so it's really, I think, important in my mind that leadership knows what they want to get out of analyst relations. When I was working as an analyst in the business intelligence space, one client here in San Francisco was always knocking on my door, always wanted to chat about what they're doing. And eventually it turned into really covering their merger and becoming one of the first business intelligence and data warehousing consulting firms, right?
What do you mean knocking on your door? I mean, physically knocking on your door at home?
No, just sending me notes saying, "Hey, we got this other thing coming. We got this other client."
So they're not a paying client. They're kind of a smaller firm, and they're just kind of trying to get your attention on a regular basis.
They went from a non-paying to a paying client.
But they started as non-paying, and they just say, "Let me just try to get in front of Alex. Let me see what I can do to get your time."
Correct. And part of it is when they also see some of the value, the insight you provide, then they say it's worth paying, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the smaller firms are resource constrained, but analysts have a keen interest in, being, one of the first to identify what's new, what's next, that's truly relevant. And I think that beyond what we've already talked about, I think that the key for the more resource constrained organizations is to be truly honest with themselves and their analyst clients, colleagues, however they think of them, about what is truly new or different. I'm sure Alex would agree. Been a lot of meetings where firms have told us about some new revolutionary thing that they're doing, and we say, no, sorry, not the case. Here's the thing you didn't know about. So it is possible, and obviously new things do come along, and I think focusing on those is really what the way out of the sort of resource problem. If you don't happen to be AWS with a much larger a budget to be able to attribute to this type of function.
What is that like when a company says, hey, we're the first person to do such and such, and you're like, no, actually I talked to 5 other guys doing that, or 1 or 2 or 3. What is that response like? Are they just totally dejected and deflated, or what? Because I would be, if I started a company and say, hey, I'm the first to doing this, and you say that, I'm like, maybe I should have talked to Gard before I started the company.
My sense, I don't know, Alex, if you would agree, but my sense is usually there's a bit of an awkward pause, and as they're assessing this, and then they usually say some version of, thank you for letting us know, we'll look into this. I mean, the benefit that these small firms have is they can read and react to situations and change things quickly. And so, as you said, if they interact with folks who, have a pretty good ear to the ground on kind of what's going on in the market, that can be extremely valuable for them, as well as for us as analysts, both learning about what kind of is right at the edge, whatever the market is that you're covering, and how that could be valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it too is for the team that's presenting to analysts to have perspective around where they really fit. I mean, it is true. Every once in a while, someone will come up with a pretty interesting, different idea. And I think that that's part of the communications challenge, is to really present it in a way that it makes sense. Either like, we're on trend because this is what clients want to buy, or here's our vision because this is where the market is going, right? And the truth is, like Gard said, it's very rare, but if you put it in context, then others can start to see what it is that you're really trying to build. Because I think that that's a lot of the challenge of organizations, is they have a really hard time communicating where they want to go, right?
You guys mentioned Amazon as an example, right? Winning awards, large team. Do you have a sense, maybe you don't, how many people are on analyst relations over there? I mean, is it like 10, like 100? Like, what's the scale that we're talking about?
I don't know the numbers right now.
What does it feel like to you? What does it seem like to you?
It is dozens.
Dozens. Okay. That's a lot of people, right? Like, think about that's bigger than a lot of the startups that we're dealing with in terms of like the total employees at the startup. Amazon has more AR people than the entire size of some companies.
Yeah, it's so for some of those organizations, you have a marketing team and then an analyst relations team, right? So Amazon has all these industries, right? Amazon Web Services. So for each industry, they might have 1 or 2 analysts.
Okay.
And then they have a bunch of technologies, and for each technologies, analyst relations professional.
Right, an AR person for each of these.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's how, when you think about the numbers, that's how it gets so big. Yeah.
That's true. And, and also, Alex, they have folks who liaise between themselves and their implementation partners, right. And their marketplaces, where, the implementation partners and others can, show their wares and sell them. So it's a multi-layered, multifaceted type of business. And so hence, more specialized AR professionals.
And that's another interesting part a question you asked earlier about the difference between AR and PR, right? Which is that as a small firm with a limited AR set of resources, where you might have 1 or 2 AR folks, you are competing in the messaging against this big mass. And it's not just AWS. Now you've got Oracle, and you've got Salesforce, and then you've got SAP, right? And these are gigantic companies with fairly good AR resources. And so that's part of the thing you have to think about, is how do you get your message, and to Gard's point, make your message a little bit more unique, as opposed to just another, hey, we're in the marketplace.
Right. That to me sounds very similar to the PR kind of fight. Like, hey, you're competing against other smart people. They've got comms people too. They're trying to get in front of you. Tell me if this analogy is wrong. When we talk to clients that are looking for media relations, say, hey, you got to think about what gives a win to the journalist. The journalist, especially in a declining newsroom environment right now, they're trying to keep their job, right? They're trying to get the things that are being measured against them, like clicks, engagement, interactions. Are their stories being picked up? Are their bylines getting attention? Are they getting audience? Because a lot of it's easily tracked, and management can go to look at journalists and say, hey, no one's reading your stories, so you can hit the door, right? When we need to shrink, you're going to be the one that shrinks. Is it a similar kind of feature here where in the journalist case, you got to help them tell stories that's going to keep them employed? Is the idea here, hey, the analysts are being measured on P&L, like how much subscribers, how much revenue are you bringing in because your research is good, right? So is it similar where the companies that talk to you need to give you something valuable such that your research is good, such that people will keep paying for it because you've got a manager above you saying, here's how many people want Alex's research, here's how many people want Gard's research. Is that a fair analogy from the PR world?
I think it's a fair analogy, but I think it maybe isn't the sort of the complete picture. At least from my perspective, the need for the analyst to be relevant, beyond just number of downloads or reads, in terms of their true understanding of the market, so that they can be valuable as an advice giver. Beyond the reports. Remember, these clients, whether they're on the buy side or the sell side, typically want more insight than is in the document, and they need to be able to to evaluate you in the context of the knowledge that you've gained, the experience that you have, and the relationships with the different players in the market.
Yeah, so I'm going to read your question a little bit differently too, Eric.
Please.
Which is how does an AR professional become successful?
Right. And then how does AR professional become successful? And I assume it's because they're helping you get some wins along the way as the analyst.
Well, yes. But so if you think about it, what Gard's saying, maybe influence, right? Analysts can show they have influence in the market. And what does that mean? Are they being invited to discussions on air or presentations, et cetera, right? Are they being asked about who to recommend for certain technologies? Are they a lot of folks reading their research, right? Those types of things are important in terms of creating analyst influence and insight. So I think an analyst relations professional needs to be able to deliver that to analysts, but also an AR by doing that, then their organization becomes more relevant within the context of what the analyst is doing. And ultimately, I think that's the win that you're looking for as an AR professional, which is how much on the tip of the analyst's tongue are you, right? How much recall do they have about what you're doing and how the relationship you're building and communicating, the stories you're telling, right? The ROI metrics that you've got about your projects or your technology, the change that your technology delivers, things like that, right?
How is it changing now? Because there's so many more influencers out there who can be not fake analysts, but I can go on YouTube and start like, here's my assessment of these companies. I can go on TikTok. I can go on Twitter. I can do a Substack. I can do a website. Like everybody out there can pretend to be an analyst on some level, right? And they're just blasting whatever they want out. I mean, especially in tech, right? Think about how many people say, hey, I'm going to review the such and such random product today. And I'm doing it on my YouTube channel and I'm getting thousands, if not millions of views to do that. So how does that change the game here in terms of the analyst role, like the role that you guys would have? You're competing in this sort of wild west of influencers out there.
The truth is some of those folks are really good, right?
Some are good. Yeah, some are good. Yeah.
And so that's part of the challenge for the analyst marketplace is some of those folks have access, are doing research. But I think what's maybe different in the role that I had at Gartner was I was working with a lot of vendors on their strategy. So I did work with buyers on the buy side, but I also worked with a lot of consulting firms and to simplify vendors, which is a little bit different. It's a more of a B2B type of role that you have. And so creating the network and community that really feeds on itself, so that that you build the intelligence about what's happening ear to the ground that Gard is talking about, is really an important component of today's analyst, I think.
I agree, Alex. And one thing I would add to that, to try to answer your question, Eric, is very, very similar to the consultant world. You can hang out your shingle and be a consultant by yourself. It's another thing to be in a network like PwC. I mean, Alex, you probably would agree with this. One of the benefits, I think, and one of the powers that when you have 1,000 analysts around the world, is to be able to play on that, to build communities of practice, to be able to collaborate. It's not all just 1,100 folks doing their own thing and never talking to anyone else. And so I think the value of that, and one of the things that we've seen over the years, is that the research tends to get stronger when it's interconnected. If our software and our hardware research are connected, it's typically stronger. If our services research references what's going on in the software markets, it usually makes it stronger. And so I think that's one way that at least the larger firms, or the folks who are not sort of individual contributors, many of whom are very good. To your point, Alex, I agree. It's something that it just is not able. Individual can't do.
Right. And to that point, what's super interesting is if you look at Gartner today, apparently there are more folks looking at the Gartner Peer Insights, which is where customers go in and put a review of technology or a company, compared to the number of people that actually look at Magic Quadrants overall, right? And so the type of information that clients are looking for is also changing, which isn't just an overall summary of the market, but much more kind of a real live understanding of how things are going.
How do you think AI affects all this? Because I've talked to some analysts and they're saying, hey, look, I can use AI to do so much of my research. I can use AI to generate a 30-page research report. I can use AI to do so much of my job that all of a sudden junior analysts might just disappear because the AI is my junior analyst. I think about it from a customer point of view. Oh, why do I need to pay for you? I can just type in my questions in AI and it'll have read a bunch of your stuff floating out there and generate some kind of answer that's good enough for free. So I see AI affecting a lot of the aspects, input and output. How do you see that from having been on the inside?
I'll start off. It's interesting, Eric. There's an analogy to when the search engines came out.
Right.
The sort of same thing happened in 1999 and beyond with Google. But in the context of AI, and in particular generative AI, when I think about where it's headed, it's early days, but those tools are very good at summarization. They're very good at checklists and doing some of the.
Tell me which vendor I should buy from. It'll give you an answer.
Yeah, and so obviously, whether you're an analyst or in AR, I think you need to up your game and realize that there are going to be some of those types of tasks that the generative AI technologies are very good at, that you should see to them. On the flip side, there are some things that these technologies, at least so far, are not as good at. In terms of synthesis. Or in terms of doing real, understanding really complex context of what's going on, and I think that's where the work is to be done. So if you take the AR example, imagine an AR executive could ask it to summarize all of Gard's research, and compare it to this other analyst, or what are the overlaps, or this type of thing. That would be that'd be an easy one, instead of spending days reading reports. To do that. Whereas, the things like synthesis, or understanding the context in which the research is going on. Gard's really only interested in emerging service opportunities. So, let's not talk to him about, these things that have been around since the beginning of time.
Yeah, and I think part of it is there's a lot, apparently, if you look at a lot of the LLMs and then Gen AI, and this doesn't seem to be changing, they try to please the user, right? So depending on how you interact with them, they try to please the user, which could mean that they're not always telling the truth. Could mean they're making stuff up. Could mean that they're creating a tone that the user prefers. And I think that that's what's so different than the in-person AR interact.
You're saying Alex is not using a tone that the person prefers. Alex is not trying to please the user. I don't care. Here's the truth.
Yeah, no, but it's not Alex. I mean, there's a lot of analysts, right? So Gard and I have known a lot of analysts, and so it's a whole different kind of interaction when you really get to work with an analyst around specific planning issues, around specific challenges that you're having, around how you're launching a product and the best way to think about it in a competitive situation. These are things Gen AI can't help you with. Like Gard said, it can summarize, like, here's what the product A is doing, product B is doing, product C is doing, and this is what you might want to do. But the analyst can tell you like why it is you want to do all these things, and why you should think about this next step, and this makes sense for you, right? So there's so much more complexity, and I don't know that that's going to be addressed in the short term, and that for a good analyst to keep doing that is everything we've talked about. Keeping their network and community strong. Building those relationships, understanding what's happening in the marketplace. And that's what AR contributes, right? So AR contributes to that portfolio that the analyst needs.
What would you each say before we go? One thing that you'd love to see AR teams do differently going forward. Now that we've talked about, hey, a world that is got AI, there are these individual contributors out there that do get attention. The growth of technologies, is it trillions of dollars and multi-trillion-dollar companies now that are out there? Like, it looks very different even than where we are 10 years ago. So where do you see, say, starting now, here we are in August, you want to see AR teams doing what differently to sort of adjust for that future?
I will say that what I appreciated as an analyst and what I try to do from an AR perspective is be relevant to the analyst, right? And so that may mean communicating and engaging when it's not just about a report, and understanding what the analyst is thinking about. Because even though they may have this specific research area, the questions and topics they're looking at change maybe quarter to quarter or year to year. And so being relevant in that perspective, in that context, is the perspective that I think is important.
I agree with that. I would really just put a spin on what I said earlier in the podcast, which is use these technologies to essentially make the relationship valuable on both sides, make it even more valuable on both sides.
You agreed with each other on a lot of things today. Is there anything that you've disagreed with each other? Going back in your many years of knowing each other, any fights, arguments, disagreements, or did somebody say something in here today that you thought, no, he's actually totally wrong?
Honestly, not.
Not in this case. No, I don't think so. But also, this wasn't terribly controversial stuff either. Right. I think in that sense, it's important, but it wasn't something where there's probably a high divergence of opinion.
Did you ever read one of each other's reports back then and thought, no, he's just wrong, he doesn't know? Like his opinion is wrong?
Nope.
I think I read some of Gard's research a long time ago, but I haven't read any of recent.
Okay.
I don't know that I ever said he's wrong. I might have had a different opinion, right? But yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to just check in, just probing to see if there's anything lurking under there. The disagreements make for better shows. But I think you're right. The fact that you're both confirming everything, it suggests like anyone who's trying to do an AR program, well, like here's a couple of analysts. This is what they're saying. They don't disagree. So you probably want to listen to them because it's confirming things at multiple firms in multiple sectors. Alex, you raise your hand.
Yeah, but knowledge feeds on itself, right? And so when the times that I have been in the same room with Gard, it's more about like he's asking a really interesting question. How am I interpreting what he's asking, right, or the answer that's coming back? And how does that pertain to the questions that I ask, right? Because I'm not always asking the same questions he's asking. I'm not interested in the same things that he's asking, but what he's asking may influence what I'm thinking about, right?
Awesome. Alex and Gard, I appreciate we got everyone from San Francisco to Paris. We got these time zones to work. We got this to happen before the weekend. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I actually learned a lot, and I think people listening to this will think, okay, this gives me some ideas of, especially if you're starting up a program, if you're a smaller firm, get on the right footing so you're not wasting a lot of people's time and money to actually start making progress in the right direction. So thank you guys both for spending time with me today.
Great to be with you.
Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.